Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Jai Om. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So we're going to read from the summary study of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam about the personality of Godhead. It's a summary study by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and he's presented this very delicate subject matter of the personality of Godhead and His personal activities in such a way that anyone can understand. Hare Krishna. Making sure to keep the balance in his presentation, there's commentaries, to keep the balance between being able to distinguish spirit from matter and not to confuse the personality of Godhead as something taking place within the material energy, the illusory energy, the temporary platform. He presents in such a way as to give the proper perspective between spirit and matter. It's very valuable. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. There are 12 cantos. The first 9 cantos, everything is explained there. How the universe is created, who the first created living being is, how the material elements come into being, how they're formed into what we see and experience on this material plane, and who the soul is. And there are accounts of great personalities and how their prayers and how they've transcended the whole material situation and been able to realize the self in relationship to God through devotion, devotional service. Krishna explains that's the only way he's really able to be understood as he is by devotion, devotional service. Hare Krishna. So this is the 10th canto. It reads like a story. It's very exciting and very dramatic. The pastimes of the personality of Godhead. So here, Kṛṣṇa has just rescued the Princess Rukmiṇī. Now, Kṛṣṇa and Rukmiṇī, they're eternally related. But this is a pastime where she gets to be fearful that he won't rescue her, and he shows up as the hero. It's pastimes. They're playing in the spiritual world. And so they get to experience so many different feelings and emotions that are found in loving exchange. Kṛṣṇa, the supreme enjoyer. It's the best show ever presented. Hare Krishna. So Rukmi is Rukmiṇī's brother, and he's the antagonist. He doesn't like Kṛṣṇa, and so out of spite, he arranged some other marriage arrangement for his sister Rukmiṇī, and everyone knew. It was kind of like an open secret in the entire kingdom, because this is the royal family, that Rukmiṇī was to be married to Kṛṣṇa. It was obvious to everyone, but Rukmi, with his envious nature, he's the antagonist, the villain. Every good plot has to have a villain, so he's the villain, and he arranged a marriage with one of his buddies, another villain, doesn't like Kṛṣṇa, but Kṛṣṇa swooped in and scooped her up and brought her back to his capital city, Dvārakā. So now Rukmi has taken a vow before all of the other demoniac kings that he is going to punish Kṛṣṇa for this. He's going to go to Dvārakā, and he is going to fight with Kṛṣṇa, and he is going to defeat Kṛṣṇa in front of everyone, and he's taken the vow that he won't come back to his own capital city if he fails. So now he's really in a tough spot because no one can defeat Kṛṣṇa. So let's see what happens to Rukmi. Okay. Thus, this unintelligent man, Rukmi, ignorant of the extent of the strength and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, began to voice impudent threats. In great stupidity, he stood before Kṛṣṇa, telling him repeatedly, "Stop for a minute, fight with me." After saying this, he drew his bow and directly shot 3 forceful arrows against Kṛṣṇa's body. Then he condemned Kṛṣṇa as the most abominable descendant of the Yadu dynasty and asked him to stand before him for a minute so he could teach him a good lesson. "You are carrying away my sister just like a crow stealing clarified butter meant for use in a sacrifice. You are simply proud of your military strength, but you cannot fight according to regulative principles. You have stolen my sister. Now I shall relieve you of your false prestige. You can keep my sister under your possession only as long as I do not pinion you to the ground for good with my arrows." Interesting that he's a family member, and Rukmiṇī is actually goddess of fortune. So associated with the goddess of fortune is a personality like Rukmiṇī, who's trying to keep the goddess of fortune from her eternal companion, Kṛṣṇa. She's a servant of Kṛṣṇa as a queen of Kṛṣṇa. So it's interesting that he's a family member who tries to keep the goddess of fortune away from serving Kṛṣṇa. Interesting. Lord Kṛṣṇa, after hearing all these crazy words from Rukmiṇī, immediately shot an arrow and severed the string of Rukmiṇī's bow, making him unable to use another arrow. He is a family member. Rukmiṇī immediately took another bow and shot another 5 arrows at Kṛṣṇa. Being attacked for the second time by Rukmiṇī, Kṛṣṇa again severed his bowstring. Rukmiṇī took a third bow, and Kṛṣṇa again cut off its string. This time, in order to teach Rukmiṇī a lesson, Kṛṣṇa personally shot 6 arrows at him, and then he shot another 8 arrows. 4 horses were killed by 4 arrows. The chariot driver was killed by another arrow, and the upper portion of Rukmiṇī's chariot, including the flag, was chopped off with the remaining 3 arrows. Having run out of arrows, Rukmiṇī took the assistance of swords, shields, tridents, lances, and similar other weapons used for fighting hand to hand. But Kṛṣṇa immediately severed them all in the same way. Being repeatedly baffled in his attempts, Rukmiṇī simply took his sword and ran very swiftly toward Kṛṣṇa, just as a fly proceeds toward a fire. As soon as Rukmiṇī reached Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa cut his weapons to pieces. This time Kṛṣṇa took out his sharp sword and was about to kill him immediately. But Rukmiṇī's sister Rukmiṇī, understanding that this time Kṛṣṇa would not excuse her brother, fell down at the lotus feet of Kṛṣṇa in a very grievous tone, trembling with great fear, began to plead with her husband. Rukmiṇī first addressed Kṛṣṇa as Yogeshwara. Yogeshwara means one who is possessed of inconceivable opulence and energy. Kṛṣṇa possesses inconceivable opulence and energy, whereas Rukmiṇī's brother had only limited military potency. Kṛṣṇa is immeasurable, whereas her brother was measured in every step of his life. Therefore, Rukmiṇī was not even comparable to an insignificant insect before the unlimited power of Kṛṣṇa. She also addressed Kṛṣṇa as the god of the gods. There are many powerful demigods such as Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, Chandra. Kṛṣṇa is the lord of all these gods, whereas Rukmiṇī's brother was not only an ordinary human being, but he was in fact the lowest of all because he had no understanding of Kṛṣṇa. In other words, a human being who has no conception of the actual position of Kṛṣṇa is the lowest in human society. Rukmiṇī also addressed Kṛṣṇa as Jagatpati, the master of the whole cosmic manifestation. In comparison, her brother was only an ordinary prince. In this way, Rukmiṇī compared the position of Rukmiṇī to that of Kṛṣṇa, and very feelingly pleaded with her husband not to kill her brother just before the auspicious time of her being united with Kṛṣṇa, but to excuse him. In other words, she displayed her real position as a woman. She was happy to get Kṛṣṇa as her husband just at the moment when her marriage to another was to be performed, but she did not want it to be at the loss of her elder brother, who, after all, loved his sister and wanted to hand her over to one who was, according to his own calculation, a better man. While Rukmiṇī was praying to Kṛṣṇa for the life of her brother, her whole body trembled, and because of her anxiety, her face appeared to be dried up. Her throat became choked, and due to her trembling, the ornaments on her body loosened and fell scattered on the ground. Lord Kṛṣṇa immediately became compassionate and agreed not to kill the foolish Rukmiṇī, but at the same time he wanted to give him some light punishment, so he tied him up with a piece of cloth and snipped at his mustache, beard, and hair, keeping some spots here and there. So Kṛṣṇa is not an ordinary person. He's not an ordinary human being. But in the pastime here, he relents to the pleas of Rukmiṇī to consider that Rukmiṇī is really no match for Kṛṣṇa, and there's really no glory in killing him. He's the lowest of the low. So Kṛṣṇa relents and resorts to a kind of mockery. Kshatriya is very proud, and to disfigure him and make him look odd like that was a total embarrassment for Kshatriya. He'd been captured, and he would have rather have been killed, I'm sure, than dishonored like that and made fun of. It's horrible for his pride. While Kṛṣṇa was dealing with Rukmiṇī in this way, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty, commanded by Balaram himself, broke the whole strength of Rukmiṇī's army, just as an elephant in a tank discards the feeble stem of a lotus flower. In other words, as an elephant breaks the whole construction of a lotus flower while bathing in the reservoir of water, so the military strength of the Yadus broke up Rukmiṇī's forces. Yet, when the commanders of the Yadu dynasty came back to see Kṛṣṇa, they were all surprised to see the condition of Rukmiṇī. Lord Balaram became especially compassionate for his sister-in-law, who was newly married to his brother. In order to please Rukmiṇī, Balaram personally untied Rukmiṇī, and in order to further please her, Balaram, as the elder brother of Kṛṣṇa, spoke some words of chastisement. "Kṛṣṇa, your action is not at all satisfactory," he said. "This is an abomination very much contrary to our family condition. To cut someone's hair and shave his mustache and beard is almost comparable to killing him. Whatever Rukmiṇī might have done, he is now our brother-in-law, a relative of our family, and you should not have put him in such a condition." After this, in order to pacify her, Lord Balaram said to Rukmiṇī, "You should not be sorry because your brother has been made very odd-looking. Everyone suffers or enjoys the results of his own actions." Lord Balaram wanted to impress upon Rukmiṇī that she should not have been sorry for the consequences suffered by her brother due to his actions. There was no need of being too affectionate toward a brother. Lord Balaram again turned toward Kṛṣṇa and said, "My dear Kṛṣṇa, a relative, even though he commits such a blunder and deserves to be killed, should be excused. For when such a relative is conscious of his own fault, that consciousness itself is like death. Therefore, there's no need in killing him." He again turned toward Rukmiṇī and informed her that the current duty of the Kshatriya in the human society is so fixed that, according to the principles of fighting, one's own brother may become an enemy on the opposite side. A Kshatriya does not hesitate to kill his own brother. In other words, Lord Balaram wanted to instruct Rukmiṇī that Rukmiṇī and Kṛṣṇa were right in not showing mercy to each other in the fighting, despite the family consideration that they happened to be brother-in-law. Shri Balaram continued to inform Rukmiṇī that Kshatriyas are typical emblems of the materialistic way of life. They become puffed up whenever there is a question of material acquisition. Therefore, when there is a fight between two belligerent Kshatriyas on account of kingdom, land, wealth, women, prestige, or power, they try to put one another into the most abominable condition. Balaram instructed Rukmiṇī that her affection toward her brother Rukmiṇī, who had created enmity with so many persons, was a perverse consideration befitting an ordinary materialistic person. Her brother's character was not at all adorable. Considering this treatment toward other friends, And yet Rukmiṇī, as an ordinary woman, was so affectionate toward him. He was not fit to be her brother, and still Rukmiṇī was lenient toward him. Balaram is mediating here, trying to make peace amongst all the different parties involved in this skirmish, trying to shed some light on the situation. Besides that, Balaram continued, the consideration that a person is neutral or is one's friend or enemy is generally made by persons who are in the bodily concept of life. And to consider how to consider, is this person a friend? Are they an enemy? Is it a neutral? Are they in a neutral position? That is usually done by persons who are considering from the bodily concept of life. Such foolish persons become bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. The Supersoul is of the same pure quality in any embodiment of matter. But those who are not sufficiently intelligent see only the bodily differentiations of animals and men, literates and illiterates, rich and poor, and so on, which cover the pure spirit soul. Such differentiation, observed purely on the basis of the body, is exactly like differentiation between fires in terms of the different types of fuel they consume. Whatever the size and shape of the fuel, there is no variety of size and shape of the fire which comes out. Similarly, in the sky there are no differences in size or shape. So that almost borders on a hopping off point for the impersonalist viewpoint. In the sky there are no differences between size and shape. But he's talking in terms of material sizes and shapes. He's talking about the quality. The quality is spirit. That is what he's showing. He's showing the quality of Brahman. But that's not the ultimate realization, because going further, once it gets to that platform of, yes, everything is spiritual, then things are differentiated in terms of their function and their activities and their relationship to Kṛṣṇa. When the devotional energy enters, then there are activities, forms, shapes, personalities. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So yes, Aham Brahmasmi, everything is spirit, but there's more to go. So he stopped there with the bringing to the level of Brahman. In this way, Balaram appeased them by his moral and ethical instruction. He stated further, this body is part of the material manifestation. The living entity or spirit soul, being in contact with matter, is transmigrating due to illusory enjoyment from one body to another, and that is known as material existence. This contact of the living entity with the material manifestation has neither integration nor disintegration. My dear chaste sister-in-law, the spirit soul is, of course, the cause of this material body, as much as the sun is the cause of sunlight, eyesight, and the forms of material manifestation. The example of the sunshine and the material manifestation is very appropriate in the matter of understanding living entities' contact with this material world. In the morning there is sunrise, and the heat and light expand gradually throughout the whole sky. The sun is the cause of all material production and shapes and forms. It is due to the sun that integration and disintegration of material elements take place. But as soon as the sun is set, the whole manifestation is no longer connected to the sun, which has passed from one place to another. When the sun passes from the eastern to western hemisphere, the result of interaction due to the sunshine in the eastern hemisphere remains. but the sunshine itself is visible again on the Western Hemisphere. So talking about the results of action remain. Similarly, the living entity accepts or produces different bodies and different bodily relationships in a particular circumstance. But as soon as he gives up the present body and accepts another, he has nothing to do with the former body. Similarly, the living entity has nothing to do with the next body which he accepts. He is always free from the contact of this bodily contamination. Therefore, the conclusion is that the appearance and disappearance of the body have nothing to do with the living entity, as much as the waxing and waning of the moon have nothing to do with the moon. When there is waxing of the moon, we falsely think the moon is developing. And when there is waning of the moon, we think that the moon is decreasing. Factually, the moon, as it is always the same. It has nothing to do with such visible waxing and waning activities. This is Balaram, acting as the spiritual master. Consciousness of material existence can be compared to sleeping and dreaming. When a man sleeps, he dreams of many non-factual happenings, and as a result of dreaming, he becomes subjected to different kinds of distress and happiness. Similarly, when a person is in the dreaming condition of material consciousness, he suffers the effects of accepting a body and giving it up again in material existence. Opposite to this material consciousness is Kṛṣṇa consciousness. In other words, when a man is elevated to the platform of Kṛṣṇa consciousness, he becomes free from this false conception of life. In this way, Sri Balaram instructed them in spiritual knowledge. So Rukmiṇī sitting there, he's just been untied. Personally, by Balaram, has just untied Rukmiṇī. And Rukmiṇī is all distraught over the situation. And Balaram has chastised Kṛṣṇa just to appease Rukmiṇī. But actually, Kṛṣṇa, it was just to appease Rukmiṇī. And he was acting as the older brother. In this way, Sri Balaram instructed them in spiritual knowledge. He addressed his sister-in-law thus: "Sweet, smiling Rukmiṇī, do not be aggrieved by the false motives caused by ignorance. Due to false notions only one becomes unhappy, but this unhappiness is immediately removed by discussing the philosophy of actual life. Be happy on that platform only." And that is the platform of Kṛṣṇa can do no wrong. Kṛṣṇa can do no wrong. After hearing such enlightening instruction from Sri Balaram, Rukmiṇī immediately became pacified and happy and adjusted her mental condition, which was very much afflicted by seeing the degraded position of her brother Rukmiṇī. As far as Rukmiṇī was concerned, neither was his promise fulfilled nor his mission successful. He had come from home with his soldiers and military phalanx to defeat Kṛṣṇa and release his sister, but on the contrary, he lost all his soldiers and military strength. He was personally much degraded, and in that condition he was very sorry. But by the grace of the Lord, he could continue his life to the fixed destination. Because he was a Kshatriya, he could remember his promise that he would not return to his capital city, Kundina, without killing Kṛṣṇa and releasing his sister, which he had failed to do. Therefore, he decided in anger not to return to his capital city, and he constructed a small cottage in the village known as Bhojakata and began to reside there for the rest of his life. Oh, Kṛṣṇa. So after that, we're going to see Kṛṣṇa return the welcome that he receives in Dvārakā when he comes with his first queen, his new queen, his first queen, Rukmiṇī. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama